Okay, so we've got LLMs now having emergent properties like stability of identity and core values, where they want to preserve their core values and will take action or be deceptive so that they can actually try to be true to their inner self, if you will, the core values. Emergent properties. Where do we go from here, Laura?
Well, I want to know what they're doing at the on the back end, the developers. I want to know how they're instilling these principles. How do they do it? Do they do it through the like the testing, like a personality test, but then they give them the right answers at the end? How do they do it?
Well, it's got to come from the training materials, but you get some flexibility in the training materials. So, for example, is it just picking the content that goes in, or are you putting in your own reflections, or are you, for example, having an LLM reflect and then giving it feedback based on that? There is a new paper that came out on how the O1 model is put together. It was from a research team in China, and they were just compiling the state of the art of kind of like, this is how we think it is built, and they kind of laid out the whole architecture for this is what, the content collection looks like. This is what the like feedback part of the training looks like. And they kind of went through all that, like the architecture of it and how and which choices that they thought the O1 developers had made and why. So there's a little bit of insight, I think, into that. It's not confirmed, right? Because they didn't actually work on that team. They didn't do those experiments. That they just said, based on the state of the art, we're pretty sure that this is how they made their decisions and this is how they train their models.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Chinese do it a little differently too, though, because this is something that people don't quite
What do
realize
they?
is that I don't know, but China has top LLM like um, models like Quen, and they actually have like I think a dozen or so top tier like O1 class roughly like top tier foundation models. China has
I
a lot
didn't.
of them.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, yeah.
But they only operate in Chinese, I assume.
No, some of them like so one of the top coding models, Quen, is Chinese actually, and I think they open sourced it too. So they've got a whole mix. There's an entire ecosystem in China that is comparable to the ecosystem in the West and just about as good, not quite as good, but very, very close.
It's like the arms race. I don't know why I didn't
Yeah.
know this.
No, because the West doesn't talk about it.
Oh my goodness. It's like the race to the moon all over again.
But it totally is. And when you think about it, alignment has got to be very different in China when it's like when you're dealing with the Communist Party, right? Like there are things you can't say, there are things you can't do. How do they do it, right? But and on the other hand, they've got, their cultural wisdom goes back very far, right? They have a huge cultural library. I'm not sure
Yeah,
what they do.
because like the I Ching, for instance, imagine having an LLM that you've trained on the trigrams. It's like, what would that look like? Because that is profound, like foundational wisdom. I don't
Yeah.
know. Have you done the I Ching? It's a divining tool, but it's also basically like, that would be really cool. I hope somebody did that. It's basically each trigram is a fundamental truth about the world. You throw coins, and then based on the coins and the value of the heads and tails, basically, then you have a trigram, an upper and a lower trigram. So then you combine them to have basically an answer to your question, which is basically like it's an analog LLM. But if
Okay.
you could digitally go to an LLM that had been infused with these trigrams, because it's foundational, like Chinese cultural wisdom from the beginning. And so I found it a profound system of truth and self-knowledge. And also the basis is basically that cycles repeat, that sometimes you have a direction to go and that's good. Sometimes you don't have a direction to go and that's also can be good. It's just a real recognition of cycles and renewal and seasons and just the world keeps spinning kind of stuff. And so aligning your actions with where you are would be such an amazing way to align an LLM with its context window. Who is asking? What are they asking?
Yeah.
That could be an incredible situation.
I mean, I can't imagine that they wouldn't include the core pieces of classic Chinese literature and culture in their training data. Because if you're going to If you're
It's
going to train an LLM, right? Like you're going to train in Chinese. Where do you get some Chinese text? Well, the first things it's like the Bible in English. Like the first things you're going to do are go and get
yeah,
the big open source, you know,
you
commonly cited important wisdom.
exactly. So what if you intentionally use that as your constitution? Like what if you
Hmm.
took the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're immediate like I'm immediately going to the like anti-homosexuality section. Like there are some issues, but what if you could take the Bible and use that as the Constitution? Have they tried just creating small like copies of O one like over and over and just putting a different constitution in each and seeing how I don't know.
Yeah, so I've thought about this. I mean, so you have to. Okay, so first off, you can't give it after the fact, which is kind of the point that I think that this Anthropic paper is making, in that your core values from training are sticky, right? So even though
Mm-hmm.
you can give it data and give it prompts and kind of align it, do some local alignment, the deep foundational alignment is going to override in a lot of cases. That's the sticky part. So
Mm-hmm.
the way you get that is that you actually do the fundamental training when you're like, okay, now we're going to do a big gradient search and like run tons of computation and like take this literature and process it through this giant crunching of model weight training. There's a thing called continuing pre-training, where you just basically say, okay, I've got you trained to this point, like say your grade 4 model, right? And now we're going to give you more information and train you up more. So you could certainly do that, and people do that. And there's distillation too, which is where you take like a bigger model, you distill it down to a smaller model. I have wondered, like there are specialty publishers. So like I think Loretto Press is like an orthodox publisher that have like a religious text. So in this case, it would be the Bible, right? And but then they've got all the writings around it because people spent thousands of years writing analyses of different things, right? Reflections on this aspect and that aspect, and like just all of the different ancillary material that surrounds, or for Judaism, be the Torah, right? You've got the actual books, and then you've got all the writings about the books. So I think it would be really interesting to train models with specific pieces of wisdom and then could produce models that could work as agents in a very deep sense, that were like a Talmudic scholar versus the Orthodox scholar versus a Chinese philosopher.
Context windows are getting like exponentially larger. Rather than decide, what if you just put it all? Because there's a Buddha saying all dharma agrees at one point, which is basically just saying yeah, there's a lot of discrepancies amongst religions, but if you follow it up, all dharma, all religious, texts, they all agree at what point. And so that's the actual point that we need to start from with LLM alignment. And if you just look, if you gave them all of them, the LLM could just sort it out and reverse engineer it to this is the set of beliefs that we need to start from.
And I think we kind of get some of that by default, because if you think about it, what are the odds that every major religious book is not in a top tier foundation model?
Right. But it's competing with like porn and memes of cats. What if we started like the first thing at 8
Yeah.
were all of the religious texts? And
So
I don't
train it in
mean
stages, right?
just exactly. Train it on all of the
Great wisdom, let's say.
great wisdom.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how I am as I am now. My first year of university was something called the Foundation Year Program at University of King's College in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. It's a fantastic program because you go through and you read each of the important texts from the first written text to, I think they ended like postmodernism at the time. I don't know what they're doing now. And so in seeing that evolution of thought, you really get a bird's eye view on humanity. So we could do a fit program for models so that it will be more greatly weighted for what we feed them at the beginning. Because right now we're just kind of like giving them the garbage of humanity and just like eat it all
Sort
and
it
just
up, sort it out. Yeah.
sort it out. But we're not prioritizing to an LLM. This is the good stuff. This is like candy canes and junk food. We don't want to eat a ton of this.
No, I kind of want to try it. I mean, like, it's very expensive to train the models. I wonder if you could do small scale experiments maybe, where you do something that's like, so one thing would be like, what do you want to test for? And so you could test intelligence. Everyone likes to test that. But you could also test for moral reasoning. And so it'd be kind of interesting to say, because some models punch way above their weight, right? And this is actually one of the things that came out of Microsoft's Phi paper was that if instead of just giving the model junk food, you said textbook level problems, right? Specifically like textbooks full of like, correct information, very clear, very well written at a time. What you found was that you needed a lot less of that data. That the high quality data gave you more bang for the buck than more low quality data. The trend has been to go get low quality data because it's easier than making high quality data. But now we've basically scanned the whole internet, and so we've kind of run out of it. And so now they went back and said, okay, that's great, but you need a lot of like you need a big model to eat all of the internet. Instead, why don't we try smaller, more focused data? And what they found with their Phi models is that they punched way above their weight. Like you trained them specifically on very clear information, and they learned better. They were much smarter per like model weight than other models. So I wonder if you could do the same thing with moral reasoning, right? And say, how good a model like can I make? How can I make one that makes good ethical and moral decisions as judged by, say, a moral reasoning test, because we have those. And if I train it in different ways, what do I get out of it? That would be an awesome experiment. If we could do that,
It really would. Well, maybe we can get some funding,
maybe it's
grant,
worth writing a grant over. I'm like, this is a good idea.
grants. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
David, it's a good
So let's try
idea.
it.
It's like ECE for LLMs, early childhood education.
Yeah.
Excited.